police of carrying out torture as a routine occurrence to punish an alleged crime and extract confessional statements. However, the police has described the report as indecent and inaccurate. This week's edition of the program features the Amnesty report on torture in Nigeria. Hello there, glad to have you join us on the program this week. I'm Gloria Umezuke. The Amnesty report claims that Nigeria operates a torture chamber where suspects are punished until they admit to committing an offense laid against them. Well, I had an interview with a senior researcher at Amnesty International on that report released recently. Well, there's also a report on accounts of torture by security operatives. But up ahead, a report compiled over a period of 10 years by international human rights organization Amnesty International has detailed how security operatives in Nigeria routinely torture suspects using a wide range of methods such as beatings, shootings, and rape. Watch.
I was hung for about 1 hour. It got to a point when I felt life was going out of me, and I had to accept to be alive. So I accepted what they asked me to accept, and I wrote it down, and presently is in court.
Mbazigwe Onyekachi's story is one of 500 allegations of torture against security operatives in Nigeria, documented by the Amnesty International in the report titled Welcome to Hellfire, Torture and Other Ill Treatment in Nigeria. Another victim, Mr. Justin Wanko, narrated how he was beaten, suspended in mid-air and stripped naked into signing a confessional statement bordering on a murder case. It is stories like this and many others that has made Amnesty International conclude that not only is torture an integral part of the Nigerian justice system, but also there is a systemic failure to ban and criminalize torture in the country.
There is an inherent systemic failure to stamp out torture in Nigeria, which has become a routine practice by police in their investigation of criminal activities and by the military and security services. We've documented over 12 types of commonplace torture methods in this report, including beatings with whips, gun butts, machetes, batons and sticks.
The government, however, says its system does not allow for torture.
The government of Nigeria has zero tolerance for misbehavior in its systems. National Human Rights Commission has promised to use the reports from Amnesty International to investigate these cases, thereafter advise government appropriately.
The report says that since the war on insurgency commenced, about 5,000 Nigerians have been detained without trial, and some of these detention facilities are not even known to the authorities.
In the interview I had this week, I spoke with Mrs. Nicola Duckworth, who gives her perspective on this report. You're welcome to the program. Thank you. Well, before we delve into the recently released report on Nigeria's torture chambers, let's examine or assess your own assessment or rating of Nigeria's human rights record. What really is your perspective on that?
Well, Nigeria obviously is a very important country in Africa, and what Nigeria does or doesn't do has an influence in the region. So for us it's very important that the human rights standards that Nigeria itself has signed up to are really seen to be respected in Nigeria as an example for the rest of the region. And our concerns have been for a long time around torture, as you mentioned. We've been researching this for over 10 years. We've got concerns linked with that, with the conduct of operations in the northeast of the country. We've also expressed concerns about issues of the Niger Delta as well. So there are a number of things that are ongoing issues of concern for us in the country.
So when you look at our records, it doesn't look like we respect human rights. Or what exactly are you trying to say?
I'm saying that there are a lot of gaps in the implementation of the human rights that Nigeria has signed up to respect. We taking the example of torture, the UN's expert on torture came here in 2007, made a number of recommendations, including criminalising torture as a specific criminal offence in the legislation. That still hasn't happened. I mean, there's been a bill going through for about 2 years, but we're still not there. So I think, you know, that's just one example of where a commitment to respect human rights isn't still matched in practice in concrete ways.
So now your report titled Welcome to Hellfire indicted the Nigeria police of torture and of course insensitive actions. How did you arrive at this position? The report and our findings. Yes.
Yes. So as I mentioned, we have been looking into this issue of torture and other ill treatment for 10 years. We came to Nigeria 20 times to look into this. We visited
20 times.
20 times, yes, over that period. We visited police stations and prisons in various parts of the country. We've documented 500 cases of allegations of torture. That means talking to the victims, their relatives, their lawyers. We've been very thorough in this. We haven't just obviously taken people's word for it, but we've researched around it. We've looked at things like court documentation, medical evidence, photographs to support claims of torture. We've spoken to a wide range of people who have independently told us, for example, the similar things taking place, similar types of torture in one place over a long period of time. So from that, we feel confident that there's a compelling case that these are not just isolated incidents, but are actually a pattern of routine and widespread torture and ill treatment.
Let's understand the modus operandi that your organisation undertook to put this together. When you went to the prisons,
Yep.
they came to you to narrate their cases, or you asked questions, or how did it go?
Yeah, sometimes we would see people in the prisons and as part of that generally look at the prison conditions, which is another concern that we raise in our report.
And so you're able to get access?
In a number of places, yes. We unfortunately haven't had access to the State Security Service institutions, but a number of other ones we did have access to, yeah. Or else we were talking to people after they'd been released from prison or other detention.
How exactly were you able to verify their claims?
As I said, we talk to them. Sometimes if it's a fairly recent release, people might still have marks of injuries on them, which we then would look at medical records to see that the injuries that were recorded were consistent with the types of ill treatment that they had described. And as I said, talking to a number of people who don't know each other, independently saying the same thing: this happened to me in this place. These were the types of torture that were applied to me. As I say, over a long period of time, it does show that this is a pattern rather than isolated incidents.
So many of these cases were mostly in the northeast?
No, all over the country. As I say, it's a long...
Let's have examples of the sort of states in particular.
Yeah, so one of the cases that we have in our report is actually is of a child, somebody who was 15 years old at the time, from the northeast in Yobe state, who describes being rounded up with about 50 other young men from about 15 to 19, being held in a place that's called Sector Alpha, a military detention place, described being beaten with gun butts and machetes, being made to walk and roll over glass on the floor, having melted plastic poured on his back, and being forced to watch other people being shot.
And he survived all of that?
He was eventually released, yes. Yeah, but obviously needed medical care and psychological counselling after that as well. So
in how many states were you talking about?
All over the country. Don't have the exact number of states in my head, but enough of the visits that we did to give a sense that it's not just in the northeast with the military, but it's a long-standing issue throughout the country.
So you're saying states in the south were also included?
States in the south, yes, in terms of the police and detention, particularly, as I'm saying, it's widespread routine. We're not saying that this happens in every police station, but our research shows that it's particularly the case with the Special Anti-Robbery Squad and the Criminal Investigation Division institutions.
Well, your report mentioned Guantanamo Bay. I don't know how much information can you ascertain on that?
That's the Sector Alpha that I just mentioned. So there are a number of reports from people who had been held in that place. So again, consistent reports of the sort of treatment that people were subjected to, both direct torture, if you like, the ones that I just described from this 15-year-old boy, but also prison conditions that are very severe. So a lack of adequate food, lack of adequate medical attention, which also meant that people died by neglect, if you like.
Okay, please hold on with your thought. We're still with Director of Research, Amnesty International, Mrs. Nicola Duckworth. When we come back, we'll talk more about the recently released report on torture in Nigeria. Please join us again.